It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. I was thinking about Al Franken today. Al Franken, back, I think it was 2004, wrote a book called Lies and the Lying Liars Who Tell Them, a fair and balanced look at the right. And it's one of those things where you go, you know, we've known for a very long time that the right, well, not always truthful, not always honest, not always, well, forthcoming with reality. It's all about the lies. We know that the Republican Party is distorted, misinformed, flat out lied about virtually every aspect of, well, reality. Especially when you look at the campaign to smear Hunter Biden. You look at the fact to defend Donald Trump from the reality that there was a lot of ties to Russia and still are. And look, they have covered up, they have misdirected, they have shielded Trump and the Republican Party from their Russian connections. Look, this is not the party of Abe Lincoln or Dwight Eisenhower or even Ronald Reagan for that matter. I got to tell you, this seems like a bunch of honeypotted Russian and corporate assets doing what they're told and desperately doing what they're told. As we find out that, well, everything that they based their witch hunt against Hunter Biden on seems to come from somebody who a little less than honest, or so it appears. Now, you know, we find out that you've got this informant, let's call him that, who the James Comers of the world have used as their smoking gun. Evidently, you know, indicted, I guess now on false statements, and false records, and you know, all this stuff that was supposed to be the basis of well, the impeachment of Joe Biden. This was supposed to be the end of Biden. This was going to be how they were going to you know, defend Donald Trump by going after by Joe Biden. And I'll tell you what this whole thing has done for me is it's shown Republicans who they are. But it's also shown me that, you know, I like Joe Biden a whole lot more. The kind of guy you want in a position like this, the kind of father you want having children, a good guy. And the fact that the lengths that Republicans have gone through. Now, understand, it is all about power. It's about control. It's about them getting what they want, and in every opportunity. And I look at, you know, this whole thing, this whole witch hunt into Hunter Biden, which seemed orchestrated from the beginning. There's a laptop that somehow Rudy Giuliani got a hold of. Seemed fishy from the beginning. But the right media machine went all in. And now I think it's going to start to unravel even more. Now, the question is, you know, how do they double down on, well, no, there's more. We've got other smoking guns that have not, you know, smoked. Does all of this start to unravel? Do we have a media structure that starts going, hey, maybe we ask another question? Because understand, the right-wing media sphere and their corporate apologists, facts be damned. It's the narrative they want. They need some clickbait. They need people to pay attention. They need anger, outrage, need a horse race. And well, we need to do what the wealthy want. And I look in Georgia, there's another moment where, as I've told you before, I don't put a lot of stock in what people tell me in public. I don't put any stock in what people say on conservative talk shows or on CNN or any of that stuff. It's what happens when they put their hand on that book that they claim to love so much in a courtroom and swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help them their God. Or more importantly, perjury. the power of law to hold you accountable, lock you up. Now, what we've heard is this fantasy that somehow, during the pandemic, Joe Biden learned all about coding while being sleepy all the time, that he was able to hack into machines and cause all of this chaos from the centralized location in the Biden basement. They were going to orchestrate the greatest coup attempt in history right under our noses, and nobody saw it. Because there are all these stories. Now, I'm not too far away from Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, where Doug Mastriano and the Republicans held their little kangaroo court after the election, where they brought in all of these people to tell these fantastic stories of how they saw people with thumb drives and people driving around and people standing around and talking and all kinds of stuff. There were just incredible tales of voter fraud and intimidation. And as I said then, the one thing that there wasn't was a swearing of the oath, swearing on the Bible, swearing to tell the truth under perjury. That one little thing that makes people, tell the truth. It's like a truth serum, if you will. They didn't do it anywhere. And I look at this story coming out of Georgia with these people called True the Vote. Now, we've talked about True the Vote people in the past. They're the ones who encouraged, a handful of people to challenge the ballots of thousands of people that they don't know because they can. And they made some really fantastic claims of knowing that there was all of this voter fraud that happened, that they had proof, they had the receipts. They knew there was a coordinated effort to collect and deposit ballots in these drop boxes, and it was again conspiracy. Well, a judge said, well, if you've got all this proof, you've got this Fulton County Superior Court judge who said, if you got this, maybe, I don't know, put up or shut up. Maybe show it. Let's see. Let's provide some of that. Let's see this evidence. Well, we find out in a written response by the attorneys from True the Vote, they got nothing. No names, no documentation, nothing. No evidence whatsoever. Just fairy tales. Just made up allegations. Because, hey, lying is, I guess, okay. Now, remember, these are the people who tell us that they're Christians. These are the people who want those 10 rules. They want those plastered everywhere. And again, my theory has always been they want them plastered everywhere because they can't remember them. So they need that constant reminder to be a decent person and not lie, cheat, steal, and all of those things. So the question is when do the rest of us, when does whatever's left of the Republican Party wake up to the reality that they've been lied to? Not just duped, not fooled, but flat out, bold-faced lied to. There was no conspiracy to overthrow the election. There was no conspiracy to get Burisma to pay Joe Biden millions of dollars to pad his lifestyle. There was none of this stuff. It's all a big lie. When do we say, I don't know, throw these bums out? Now, again, what they keep doing to us time and time again is they keep changing the narrative. There's all this stuff, that they know is true. But they keep throwing other things out to keep us at each other's throats. And the most recent one is, there's going to be another recession. There's going to be a recession. How many times have we heard there's recession coming over the last, since January of 2021? How many times have we heard about recession? Yeah, they're playing that song once again. And again, this is part of the cover to hide what the sad reality is, and that is, back to the book, and good on Al Franken, lies and the lying liars who tell them. What we need is we need a fair and balanced look at these right-wing lies, and maybe in the courtroom we start holding these people accountable, and maybe we give them some accommodations at the Gray Bar Hotel with some new apparel. Just my thoughts. Want to hear yours? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So economist David Rosenberg of Rosenberg Research and Associates, I'm not sure who he is, but according to Business Insider, he's an economist. And he's saying that there's an 85% chance that the U.S. economy is going to enter recession here in 2024. And I got to tell you, the more I see these stories, the more they keep boomeranging back around as if people want recession, as if they're hoping for recession. And look, I guess if you predict something, long enough, it's bound to happen. But he's come up with some kind of model that he believes 85%. So take it for what it is. But here to share some thoughts on what the numbers actually look like and how the economy's doing. And, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there is an 85% chance that by the end of the year, we're going to hit a recession. That's why I've asked my good friend Matias Vernengo to come talk with us. He's a professor of economics at Bucknell University. Matias, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thank you for having me, Rick.
So
85%, you say? That's very precise.
What do you make of this, though? I mean, the more that we keep hearing these, recession's around the corner, doom and gloom is coming, because it sells and it scares people. What do you make of this?
So, you nailed it when you said that there's an old joke in economics that economists have predicted, 6 out of the last 5 recessions. And, because, if you keep saying there's going to be a recession, next year, at some point there'll be a recession and you'll be right. So you eventually, the broken record will be right. So I'll say this: last year it seemed more likely to me because it seemed like Republicans at some point they were willing to have a government shutdown, and it seemed like the Fed was going to go increase in interest rates, and that may turn the housing market, and perhaps that would have had an impact. At this point, all of those things, the Fed could have continued hiking the rate because inflation was still high, but inflation came down. The Fed is not going to increase. The question now is when the Fed will start reducing the rates. Republicans clearly, I think, on a political level, perhaps Trump thinks that it's a better idea to shut down the government, so they don't seem to be going to do that which is true. It may backfire. They may be blamed for the shutdown rather than, the consequence on the economy and whatnot. So I'm not sure. So right now, there is no reason to think that there is something dark in the horizon. So the economy, the numbers are well, unemployment is low. Inflation was slightly higher than they hoped, but again, it means that probably the Fed will just reduce interest rate later in the year rather than sooner. Income inequality has come down to some extent. Some of these programs have sort of brought back some manufacturing jobs, real wages. With all of the stuff that happened in the pandemic, it's true. We come from 40 years of an economy that has been anti-workers. And so the recovery, which has been exceptional, has only put us back slightly above where we were in 2020, which was not great. But, it's one of the best places we've been in a long while. So, and in particular, the benefits of this last boom have gone mostly to people at the bottom. So all of those are good things, So I don't see any reason to think that there is a great chance. 85 seems like a lot. I mean, sure. I mean, I might be wrong, and we're discussing in 6 months a recession. But I would say the probabilities of a recession at this point look, relatively low.
Yeah, I got to tell you, as I was reading through this article, and Business Insider, I've always viewed as somewhat middle of the road. It's some decent reporting. I saw this as one of these things to scare people into get out there and make some economic moves. It's like almost a sales pitch more than actual news, because this doesn't seem like a serious prediction to me. This seems like something designed specifically to scare people into some kind of an action.
Yeah, I'm not even. I don't know who Mr. Rosenberg is, so I'm not even sure what's the sort of action that they intend to sort of bring with that. Perhaps is that they're afraid that they want the Fed to reduce interest rates faster. I'd be surprised. I mean, I would be for the Fed reducing interest rates. I think that particularly for housing market, it would be sort of a good thing, and so in that respect. It will help not just with mortgages, but it will help with rent, which has been one of the sort of persistent things hurting working class people. But I'm not even sure what's the sort of fear. I should say that this economy has been good obviously for people at the bottom, but people at the bottom in the United States have had for a long while sort of a bad economy. This economy has also been very good for people in Wall Street. Well,
that's one of the things he says here. He says, a recession, and this is one of those, he said, if a recession did materialize, it would probably be disastrous for the stock market. You go, really? You think a recession would be bad for Wall Street?
Well, Wall Street always recovers, so they don't suffer much. So, and even if, when Wall Street gets into trouble and banks get into trouble, they're rescued. So that's not necessarily, something that I would be too concerned. So my fears are, as in this, because the economy plays a fundamental role in politics, and a recession would be a terrible thing, politically, I think, for any sort of possibility of a more progressive, kind of policy in the United States from the economics point of view. So a recession could be disastrous, but I'm not concerned with what would happen with Wall Street. I'm concerned with what would happen politically if we have even a mild recession. Because politically, the current situation is not one of the best.
Yeah, I'm with you. Now, the other thing that we keep hearing a lot about is we got a $34 trillion debt. I keep hearing, the sky's falling, Matias. It's a lot of money. Look, it is. It's a huge number. The interest rates, the interest payments on this, a big number. I keep hearing the sky's falling. The end of the world's coming. There's a currency collapse around the corner. The BRIC nations are going to take over. There's all this doom and gloom and all of this chaotic talk. How much of that is reality? How much of it is just, hyperbole?
It's nonsense, with all due respect. I always say, when kids say, numbers, large in comparison to what, the $34, trillion. So the American economy has had an incredible recovery. It's growing steadily, much more. I mean, we had news, for example, today, Japan, the economy has tanked, and and I should say China, even when they say they're tanked, it's like 5% growth. But at any rate, we're doing very well. The whole of the debt of the United States is in its own currency. The United States government doesn't have any problem paying its bills. The only possibility of having a problem is not an actual economic problem. It's a political problem of Republicans, for political reasons, trying to, not increase the debt ceiling. That's purely political. It has no bearing on the ability of the U.S. government to roll its debt and pay the interest and pay whatever it's necessary. If anything, what people should be concerned when they think about that. So I always say the important thing about the accumulation of debt is that the accumulation of debt implies that you're running deficits, and so you're spending money and you're taxing. And over time, that is okay if you use the spending to promote things that will be good for the American people and will generate growth. Why? Because that growth will lead to tax revenue that will allow you to pay everything in the future and you have no problem. And so we actually have used this money in very intelligent ways. We have, for the first time in the Biden administration, tried to bring back industry back into the country. We're producing chips. We are trying to spend in infrastructure. We're trying to spend in green technology and energy, which we will need in the future. So all of those things are things that will allow the economy to expand and grow in the future and pay back the debt. So there is no reason to be afraid of an impending collapse, an Argentinian collapse of the American economy, in which we're not going to be able to pay our debts. That's absolutely absurd. So that is fear mongering, and it's sort of the kind of fear mongering that politicians on the right use to try to say that the left, or whatever is perceived as the left, the Democratic Party, is spending too much money, we're going to be austere and not spend. And then the first thing they do when they come to power is cut the taxes for the very wealthy. So this kind of stuff, which is repeated, I mean, I've been in this country for almost 30 years and lived in the aura and the news of American, so we have CNN at home back in Brazil in the 80s. So it's been forever. It's the same thing Reagan said. Oh, those Democrats are spending too much. With me, this is going to end. And then cutting the taxes for the while, and the deficits balloon and the debt balloons. So they're the party that has increased the debt. When they come to power, they generate deficits. They're terrible deficits, a deficit to give money to the very wealthy. And the current budget situation not only is safe, but it's also intelligent. It's trying to spend money in good ways to promote growth in the future.
No, it's like I took an economics course 100 years ago, and it was explained simply that the difference between good debt and bad debt. Good debt is you lose your job, you go out buy a suit, you do a resume, you take a class. That's good debt. Bad debt is, hey, I lost my job, I'm going to go on vacation. And I think you're right. Biden and the Democrats have spent money, I think, in the right directions, investing in infrastructure, reshoring manufacturing, ensuring that people can put food on the table and keep a roof over their head. And it's ironic to me that
they have been stopped in many ways. They could have done more.
Absolutely. And we don't disagree on that. And it's because, and this is where I was going to go with this, it's because Republicans have so masterfully, through their media channels, told us, we're going broke. We don't have any money. We've spent all this. We can't possibly help the poor, the downtrodden. We can't possibly invest in the future for education and healthcare. We can't do these things. Wish we could, but we're broke. And that's the narrative that's been playing out for the last 30 plus years.
Yes, it is. It's disingenuous. It's dishonest. They know that that's not the case. The first thing they'll do if they win an election is cut taxes and maintain spending. And the difference is where the spending will go. The spending will go for corporate welfare. So they'll spend with contracts for the super wealthy. So Mr. Elon Musk will get a super contract for NASA to put something on, on Mars or something along those lines. So that's the big difference on this. It's that they have money when they want to spend the money, but they want to spend the money and redistribute it to the very wealthy.
And to your point, I look at Missouri, a solid red state. As we speak, they're moving legislation to eliminate income taxes for corporations. A state that would lose, I think that the number they said they'd lose about $900 million if this were to happen, when you've got a state and 1 out of 7 people in Missouri live in poverty. Because, hey, we got to give corporate America more.
Yeah. It gives, I don't remember who was the politician that said that Republicans are the party that, think that government doesn't work. And when they go to power, they prove it. And it is that's a case in point. It's like it makes no sense. It makes no sense.
Now, for those who say it's unsustainable to continue to grow debt and to keep doing this, I don't disagree with that. We do need to pay our bills. I say all the time, I'm a tax and spend liberal. In my household, if I need more money to fix the hole in the roof or whatever, I bring in a little bit more money. I think we should be, as Warren Buffett said, We should be raising taxes on the very wealthy. We should be shoring up the folks on the bottom, extending the earned income tax credit. There are things policy-wise we should be doing to make the economy a little more fair for working people while simultaneously paying our bills.
I'm for those 2-3 things you said. So I'm for taxing the wealthy, although I think that that's more a distributive issue. I'm for, and the same I think about the earned tax income credit. I think that when you look at the history of how debt has come down, of consolidations, and how we brought it down, it was never by generating significant surpluses by cutting spending. It was very off. So, for example, the United States at the end of Second World War had 120% debt to GDP ratio, and we're about that level again. And it came down throughout the 50s and 60s. Well, most of the time we were on deficits, even with Eisenhower and Kennedy and Johnson. So the question is, how do you reduce the debt to GDP ratio if you are, it's not the debt overall. So the debt grew, but the economy grew faster than the debt. So your ability to pay. So the debt was becoming smaller as the income of the economy as a whole was going up. So what was, was generating this sort of, reduction of the debt, bringing it into safe levels. Exactly the sort of thing that you are suggesting is that in that period we spent money very wisely. We did a GI Bill. We gave money to people to go to college. We gave money to people to buy their houses. We built infrastructure. The road system that we still have with us. We send people to the moon and all of the other things that are associated with that. So even the military-industrial complex was used in a way that produced technological innovation and growth and so on and so forth. And so most of those increases, I should say, in productivity were passed to wages, so the consumption basis and large middle class was created. So, and that was coming down, not because we spend less, not because the size of the debt in dollar terms went, and the debt went up, but the economy went up much more. And so the share of the debt went from 120% of GDP to about 30% of GDP. And so that's doable. That's doable. That's the way of getting out of debt, is spending intelligently, so that the economy grows more than the debt we accumulate.
The steal of Bushism to make the pie bigger.
Yes, it's exactly right.
So before I let you go, 85% recession, the chances of that, if you were to assign a number, would that be 85% wrong? Where do you see this potentially?
This is less than 15%. So let's put it, if we're going to put a number, this guy is almost 100% wrong.
There you go. Matias, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me. Our
good friend Matias Vernengo. I want to hear your thoughts. Are you concerned? Do you think that we're that close to recession? The 85%? I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Miss any portion of the program? Make sure you grab the podcast.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So here's some fun and entertainment. Obviously, the State of the Union address is going to be March 7th. As President Biden will talk about the incredible accomplishments of his administration. I think kind of using this as the springboard for campaign season, saying, look at all of what I have done. Look at what the most productive presidency in my lifetime, look at what it looks like. Look at the investments in infrastructure. Look at the investments in manufacturing. Look at the policies that we've moved to make people's lives better. Look at all this stuff. Evidently, the Republicans and Trump are considering maybe Trump giving the rebuttal, which I think would be, oh, please do that. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day. I've asked our good friend Sarah Burris to come talk with us. Sarah's a reporter at Raw Story, rawstory.com, the website. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
Please, God, let it be Trump. That would just be
seriously
the chef's kiss.
I want him to cozy up with Marco Rubio. Marco can hand him a bottle of water. But what do you think of that? I mean, has the Republican Party completely lost their mind? Because it looks like they're completely the Trump Party. They're no longer Republicans. They're the Trump Party.
No, absolutely. That's absolutely the case. And So one of the stories that we were talking about before we jumped on is that we talked to a whole bunch of members at the Capitol this week after the George Santos seat flipped back to a Democrat, and a lot of them are just sort of, maybe not in denial completely, but there's the sect of them that believes that the reason that the Republican lost is because she was not Trump enough, which I think is amazing, and I think should be applied to every single Republican candidate across the board.
Yeah. No, I mean, if you listen to Marjorie Three Names, Marjorie Taylor Greene said, basically said that. The reason that the Republicans are losing is they're not Trump enough, meaning they're not fascistic enough. They're not crazy enough.
And I think too, her other point was she tried to say that redistricting made the district more democratic. She called it a D+8, which isn't true at all.
But again, these are people who these are the alternative facts people, Sarah.
Yeah, it's true. I know. We're surprised that somehow Marjorie was making stuff up. We may actually have different district lines in the November election, but for this special election, it was the exact same lines as what George Santos had. My favorite was that he texted a whole bunch of them afterwards, like this whole diatribe of, see, I told you so, and you deserve everything you get. It was really funny.
Yeah, and the response to that is, you did this. You being such a horrible human being, you caused us to lose because you showed the American people exactly who we are. We've been hiding that very, very close to the chest, and you just very flamboyantly, bounced around the Capitol, rubbing it in people's faces.
My favorite response was the one Republican member of Congress in Maryland replied with, "New phone, who dis?" I was like, "Well played, sir." Well
there you
played.
go. No, trolling is good. I still think that the victory in trolling went to Joe Biden this week after the Super Bowl, with the image of him in the dark Brandon thing, writing just as we drew it up about the Super Bowl. I thought that was perfect.
That was perfect. And I mean, there were a bunch of responses of people who were making the conspiracy theory comments. But what I think played into that is that MAGA then threw this big fit and they were calling the Super Bowl rigged. And it's just like, wow, you guys are really sort of playing that stereotype. Like we make fun of you for this stuff. And now you're just really going balls to the wall with it.
No, they're all in, and this is the sad reality of where we are, and this is honestly the power of right-wing media to convince otherwise somewhat thoughtful people that there really is a CIA conspiracy to overthrow our elections by using a pop singer and a football game. Because of course our CIA can do these kind of Rube Goldberg intricate schemes that no one else can do, evidently.
Right. Like, I can't imagine that is somehow something that the government could pull off. But all of these other things, just completely are unavailable for our government to do or figure out. Like, it just somehow this one thing they could manage without screwing it up or without, anybody finding out.
Yeah, but the nefarious
everything
stuff,
else in the world.
The most outrageous, nefarious kind of stuff they can do, but simple things like paving roads and ending poverty and things that we know we have the answers to, evidently can't do it, or telling the truth.
Right.
And look, what's interesting that's coming out this week is just how big of liars our Republican friends are. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed that the DOJ charged one of the informants in the Hunter Biden case with making false statements and obstruction. And surprising surprise, the Republicans were all in on this nonsense.
This is what happens when you put all of your faith in one single person and I guess put all your eggs in one basket and assume that this one guy is going to give you everything that you want and that he's completely verifiable. I guess no one did.
Let me ask you, do you think that they cared whether it was verifiable or it was even true? This was about retribution. This was about revenge. And I think this is the important part in all this, because Trump is running a campaign on, I'm going to get back into power and I'm going to exact my revenge. And this is the kind of stuff with what revenge-minded people do. They don't care about truth. They don't care about reality. They don't care about legal. They clearly want to by whatever means necessary to make their objectives. And this is part of that, I think.
Well, I think they tried to Benghazi Joe Biden.
Yeah.
It worked really successfully with Hillary Clinton, and it got them more information that led them to the email server issue. So even if they, didn't find anything in the Burisma issue, they were hoping to get all of the finances from Biden, from his family, his brother, his son, like everybody, and be able to comb through them and find information that they could use against him. And basically what happened is the guy who was indicted by a grand jury actually indicted him, basically said that the testimony that he gave over time just kept changing. And the original testimony was that Joe Biden got a $5 million deal from Burisma to hire his son because they wanted to get, favorable treatment by the vice president. And it never happened. And now the guy who told him is being arrested because it never happened.
And the thing for me is, this is another one of those moments where, this is another reason why I like Joe Biden so much. The more that this stuff comes out, the more it looks like he was completely on the up and up. And his character in no way, shape, or form tarnished by any of this. And what came out for me is, the guy's a good father. I mean, the kind of father I think every one of us would want.
I do think that is a huge part of this, because his relationship with his son, obviously he has a very, very close relationship with his family after his wife and daughter were killed, and the boys were hurt so bad. But I think because of his close relationship, this idea of what to do whenever your child is addicted to drugs has become such a big piece of this conversation. And so for those of us with family members who either died of an overdose, or family members we've had who have been addicted, this is a huge conversation that really was never dealt with during the Trump administration, and it wasn't really taken seriously. And so I think there's some hope here that at least we have somebody in the White House who understands this and can hopefully help us figure out some solutions to a serious problem that should have been addressed a long time ago.
Yeah. Now, where does this go then? I mean, clearly, we've been mocking the witch hunt into Hunter Biden for a while. James Comer, basically saying they've got the smoking gun, and basically, like a cap gun that's wet, nothing. Does this go away? Do they double down? Do we eventually hold Comer responsible? Does Hunter Biden now have, a Smartmatic kind of lawsuit? I mean, because obviously the right-wing echo chamber bought completely into all of this. Where do you see things going from this moment forward? Or is this like I said, do they just double down and find another dupe to make stuff up?
I do think that they'll probably double down. I absolutely think that Hunter Biden should try and sue Fox News over this, because Sean Hannity made this a huge part of his show. He took this one witness and did something like 45 monologues about it. And, again, when you put stuff on the air, you have to fact check this stuff. And again, this is something that they didn't do in this case. And I mean, I hopefully at the end of this, it will be, Fox News brought to you by Smartmatic and Hunter Biden.
No, but here's my problem with this. Again, Fox clearly, I think, has some culpability here, but it's also, the fact that the Republicans were so hell-bent on revenge, so hell-bent on going to get Joe Biden, like they believe Democrats did to Donald Trump, that facts and reality didn't matter. What Trump got impeached for, Trump did. This completely different.
Yeah, and I think that Republicans, they drink their own Kool-Aid, but they are so disconnected from the reality of the rest of America, that they're missing so much of what they're saying and how it hits. Like there are so many people who aren't really paying attention to politics. Like I keep reminding myself, like, we are not normal. You and I are not normal people, not even a little bit. And so I always use my parents, as the barometer for what normal people are hearing about. But when it comes to the Biden impeachment and all of that, like that was something they knew about, they were paying attention to. And so ideally, hopefully this can turn into some kind of question for James Comer. But at the same time, like he's already talked about how he's going to use this as another, hearing against the IRS to look at ways in which the IRS selectively prosecuted certain people, which is interesting because I don't know if you remember, but our lovely friend Roger Stone was not prosecuted for owing like $150 million or something ridiculous like that, and Joe Biden or Hunter Biden was. So that seems like a selective prosecution to me. At the same time, there's also, I don't know if you remember, but during the Trump administration, there were all of these really invasive audits that happened for James Comey and Andy McCabe.
Yeah.
That didn't find anything. I think Andy McCabe, they actually owed him money back. But, it was something that just happened. It was a very, very rare audit that just suddenly happened to two of Donald Trump's biggest foes.
No, look, this is where I want people to understand that if Trump is reelected in November, this is going to be the norm. This kind of retribution, this kind of weaponization of the IRS that Republicans claim is happening will actually happen. Because, I go back to what my mother always said. If someone's accusing you of doing something and you're not doing it, chances are it's them who's doing it. They're just trying to find someone to blame for it. And this is because Republicans, this is their tick. When they're making these accusations, it's what they want or what they are doing. So, that's, for me, that's where I start to look. What are the allegations? And then what are their actions with those allegations? And more often than not, they're the ones doing this stuff.
The thing is I really resisted that idea and that narrative for a long time because I kept thinking, surely they're not that stupid. Right? But
no, these are people who are drunk with power, Sarah. They believe that they're invincible because they're in gerrymandered districts where it doesn't matter what they do. As long as they stay on the crazy train, they're going to be fine. The second you step off, like the senator from your home state who found out what happens when you buck the crazy train, that's when you get held accountable. But as long as you stay crazy, you're golden.
And I think, too, Donald Trump has come down on them in a really serious way where I don't think he is afraid to threaten them with primaries, with coming after them to take any of their power away. So it's not necessarily, Democrats trying to threaten them or, anything back home. It's their own people. They're eating their own. And it's Donald Trump who's really at the head of that. He is the head snake who's trying to eat its own tail. And I think that this idea of revenge and retribution, even if that is inherent in the Republican Party, I don't know that they are necessarily, that a lot of those Republicans are brave enough to do stuff like that. They saw what happened with Benghazi. And so, Jim Jordan was super excited to reinvent this wheel. But, obviously it hasn't turned out that way. Yeah. And it's made a lot of people look really stupid. And it's brought up a bunch of James Comer's, financial issues. And so I can't imagine that some of these Republicans who, I don't know if you noticed, but we got another Republican member of Congress who is retiring this week, who announced that they were retiring. A lot of those Republicans who I think are the old timers and the people who are, maybe we considered to be somewhat sane, all of those people are just like, yeah, I'm out. So it really is going to be the inmates running the asylum if they take back Congress. And, even if they don't take back Congress, I feel like that's going to be the Republican House for sure.
No, look, if you're one of the last of the old Republican guard, if you're one of the last ones at the party, and Trump is elected in November, the things that you're going to be required to do as a member of that caucus I'm going to say are going to be criminal. And if you're smart, you're bailing right now so that you don't put yourself in that position. Because look, none of them have. I'm not going to say the courage, but none of them have the ability to stand up to him because the entire establishment there, the entire Republican establishment is corrupt.
It is. And, I think looking at what happened in Oklahoma, again, bringing up James Lankford, like the state party mechanism got into this huge fight because half of it decided that they were going to censure him or, give some sort of vote of disapproval for him. And then
for doing his job.
They pulled that back. And I mean, it turned into this huge cluster, in their state party. And then you've got this insanity going on in Michigan. And so I feel like the Republican Party was sort of always fighting itself between the moderates and the conservatives. Now it really is sort of the right and the far right are now fighting each other. Mm-hmm. And it's just two different branches of the party who are so crazy and so willing to do even the craziest of things. And it's just like, man, sit back and watch the smoke.
But here's the thing, and this is where I look, the puppeteers in Congress, the players in the game are one thing. The people who put them there, that's for me the problem. The fact that you would think in that environment that you've said, the far right and then the crazy right, they've co-opted the party. You would think, those moderate Republicans would go, no, we're not doing this. We're taking our ball and going home. No, they just fall in the line and keep crazy in power. And that's my problem with the Republican voters, that they know what's going on is wrong. They know what their party is doing is destructive. And yet they keep voting for these people who have no ideas, who have no vision, who have no policy chops, and are moving us towards a fascistic society. There's no courage there. And that's where my problem is.
And I think that's a huge question that should be taken to the voters, but nobody's doing that. Everybody's running their own races for their own seats, and nobody is fighting as a broader conversation about, hitting the Republican Party for what it has become, other than Joe Biden, and even in his case, he's talking about it with respect to the MAGA wing of the Republican Party. Yeah. It's not, showing that, no, it's not just the MAGA wing, it's the Tea Party wing. Like, all of these people are crazy now. And that's because most of the sane people are either terrified or they've already left.
So finally,
or already been voted out.
Finally, got to get your thoughts on, because we need to create a horse race. We need to create some intrigue, since it's going to be a long time till November. Evidently, Joe Manchin's back in the news again. Obviously flirting with a third party run. He's come out and said that Mitt Romney right now would be his hypothetical running mate. Might even pick Rob Portman from Ohio. When do we get rid of? When does Joe Manchin go away?
For the love of God, will Joe Manchin go away? I don't understand why somebody on the left hasn't offered him a very, very well-paid position doing something else.
I'm sure they
because
are.
that would be the way to get rid of him, is be like, here is a couple $1 million for you to sit here and talk about moderate policies and yada, 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 and just shut up. And I think the thing about Manchin going to Ohio and saying, oh, I'd love Mitt Romney, but then saying, but I'd be fine with Rob Portman. It's like, do you know the difference between those two guys? Like, it is really night and day here. Like, Rob Portman is kind of, he's not as Russia focused as Ron Johnson is, but come on, man. Are you really just saying, how about those dolphins while in Florida? Like, is that what it's about? Or I don't know.
Yes. Yeah. And that's it. I think you hit the nail on the head, looking for that payday. But Sarah, as always, great stuff. I appreciate the time. So much more to get to, but we're out of time. Thanks so much for taking time for us.
Thank you. Have an awesome week.
You as well. Our good friend Sarah Burris. Make sure you check out the work she does over at Raw Story, rawstory.com, for our free speech TV audience. Thanks so much for tuning in. For our radio affiliates across the country, we're going to take a quick break. Right back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1870. That was the day the powerful labor orator Leonora O'Reilly was born to an Irish immigrant garment worker in New York City. During her lifetime, Leonora left her special mark on the labor movement as a member of some of the leading organizations of working people of her day. At age 11, she went to work at a collar-making factory. By 16, she joined the Knights of Labor. Her activism as a feminist, suffragist, and trade union organizer led her to help form a chapter for women workers as part of the United Garment Workers of America. Leonora also helped to found the Women's Trade Union League chapter in New York. Although Leonora helped to found these women's organizations, she continued to push for men's unions to open up their doors to women members. She believed it would take men and women working together to improve labor conditions. Her skill as an orator put her in great demand. At the peak of her career as an organizer, she averaged one speech a day. After giving a speech to a large union of New York telegraphers, their newsletter declared, "There is no record anywhere of a more magnificent speech than the one delivered by Miss O'Reilly." Leonora was a founding member of the organization that eventually became the NAACP. She spoke frequently about women's suffrage. In 1912, she appeared before a joint Senate committee to testify about the need for women to gain access to the ballot box, where she lived up to her fiery reputation, declaring, "You cannot and will not make laws for us. We must make laws for ourselves. We working women need the ballot for self-protection." That is all there is to it. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I want to wrap up today's program on, again, another reason why I'm a supporter of Joe Biden. The people that he has put into positions of power in different organizations to do the things that we need them to do. And as I've said, Jennifer Abruzzo at the NLRB, huge, something we desperately need, a worker-centric, worker-friendly person over at the Department of Labor. Also Lena Khan over at the Federal Trade Commission. This is a big deal. This most recent notice that has come out that said, hey, look, we're finally going to do something about the misuse of AI. We're finally going to maybe do something to combat AI impersonations of people, of corporations, of organizations. Because look, these deep fakes, I don't know if you've seen many of them. It's scary stuff. Now understand, we're so far behind in regulating what AI is going to do. We're so far behind in regulating what this is not going to just do to our workplaces and to our individual lives, but to our ability to govern, to our ability to have honest discussions and elect leaders on real facts. This is troublesome. Now, I think we're way behind in this, but at least you've got the folks over at the Federal Trade Commission now proposing some rule changes that would help. And again, we've got a lot of catch up to play because as they point out, there's a surging number of complaints around impersonation fraud. And I had someone reach out to me and tell me that there's technology right now that when you talk to somebody on the phone, and this just scares me to no end, that you talk to somebody for a couple minutes on the phone, that they can actually, basically grab your voice imprint and use your voice for other messages. And it sounds, for the most part right now, close to your voice. So if you have one of these things, and we've talked about this, we had Dana Nessel on the program, talking about identity theft and fraud and all that. Imagine, someone, calls your grandmother and with your voice, or calls your mother, your elderly, relatives in your voice and say, hey, I need some help. Do you think they're going to do it? Of course they are. And to have this kind of ability is frightening. And he was saying, look, the technology is only going to get better. Right now, there's some glitchy stuff. Right now, there's some problems. Right now, there's some stuff that you go, well, they might get away with it sometimes, but not always. The technology going to get better, and it's going to get better fast. And this is why we need people who are going to get ahead of this. Again, not just in the workplace, but in all aspects of life. The fact that this is out there and possible is kind of frightening. So over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be delving into AI and delving into some of the things that could potentially come out of this, and hopefully we'll get some ideas on how we move forward in this brave new world, and maybe how we protect ourselves, our neighbors, our families, and our jobs and our society from people who just simply want to do us harm. But I'm going to want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Have you been contacted by any of these AI fakes, these deep fakes? I've seen some. Man, they're scary. But I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you find your favorite podcast, you'll find ours. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.